Okay, we had been looking, Bekitzer at least, because I'm really more interested in going over the central concepts than every detail. It's not shaykh for us to go over every detail in Hilchot Teshuvah, at least, and this go over. But in Perek Gimel, the Rambam developed the concept of certain averos, erein lo chelek l'olam haba, and those are primarily mistakes in belief, mistakes in incorrect belief of the nature of God, etc. Now, Perek Dalid of Hilchot Teshuvah goes into a different idea, so don't confuse the two. Perek Gimel is who has a chelek in Olam Haba. Perek Dalid is a very brilliant discussion of 24 things that are ma'akev et Teshuvah. Now, ma'akev et Teshuvah means there are 24 things that make it difficult to do tshuva. Now, these are not necessarily the averis that you don't have a chelik in olam haba. As we go over it, you'll see these are simply things that make it hard to do tshuva. We'll see what this is. But again, it does not correlate. Do not confuse. There are two negative lists in Hilchot Teshuvah. There is the negative list of ein lo chelik olam haba. And then there's another negative list of 24 things that are ma'akev et Teshuvah, and those two lists basically don't even overlap. They're two different types of situations. But before we do that, I want to go backwards to Perek Beis, and again, we're shortly before Rosh Hashanah, so I think it's kedai to actually read the Rambam's very brief discussion of the mitzvah of Tekiyas Shofar in the middle of Hilchot Teshuvah. Now, there is another section of the Mishnah Torah, which is called Hilchot Shofar Sukkah V'Lulav. Right? The Rambam puts Shofar, Sukkah, and Lulav in a whole set of halachas, where the Rambam goes over the halachas of Shofar in great detail. But in the middle of Perek Beis, the Rambam gives us a brief essay on the spiritual meaning of Shofar. And it's worthwhile to keep that in mind. Let me just find it here. Yeah, I'm sorry, it's in Perek Gimel. Yeah. So I'm going to read it. I'm actually going to read it and translate it. This is Perek Gimel Halacha Dalit in Hilchot Teshuvah. And the Rambam says, Afal pi shetkiyas shofar b'Rosh Hashanah gezeres hakosef. On one level, the obligation to blow the shofar on Rosh Hashanah is a gezeres hakosef. So if you ask the question, why do we blow shofar on Rosh Hashanah? The answer is because God said so. You don't have to know any reason. But the Rambam then says, even though it's a gezeres hakosef, remez yeshbo, there's a very important hint in the blowing of the shofar. Kolomar, it means, uru yeshenim mishinaschem. Wake up, sleepyheads. The shofar, this is the Rambam's view of shofar. There are many other opinions, but the Rambam's view of the shofar is it's like an alarm clock that we go through life sleepwalking. We go through life without thinking about what the purpose of our existence is. We just go through the motions of living. And every once in a while, there comes a time in which we're supposed to wake up and think about the purpose of our lives. Uru yeshena mishinaschem, arise, sleeping people, from your sleep. V'nir damim hekitzu mitar damaschem, and those who are slumbering, wake up from your slumber. Chipsu b'maasechem, look into your actions. V'chizru b'teshuvah, and to turn to God with teshuvah. V'zichru borachem, and remember your Creator. Elu hashaychim es ha'emes b'havli hazman. It is so easy to forget the truth in all of the hevel, all of the shtuyot, all of the foolishness, the vanities of regular life. V'shaygim kol shenasam behevel v'rik, and people waste all of their lives with hevel and rik, Again, vanity, nothingness, and emptiness. Asher lo yoyel v'lo yatzil. This will not save a person. This will not protect a person. Habitu l'nafshosechem. Look at your own souls. Heitivu darchechem aleichem. Improve your pathways in life and your deeds. V'yazev kol echad mikem darkei hara machshavtei. And each person should forsake the negatives in their pathway of life and in their thoughts. Asher lo tova. That is not good. And that's the basic message of the shofar. Now, again, there are many other messages of shofar as well, but the Rambam says that the concept is the wake-up call to look into our lives. Lahavdil, even Socrates, and Lahavdil, said the unexamined life is not worth living, that a person has to look into their life. What is my life about? What is my purpose? Do I eat to live, or do I live to eat? Why do I make money? Again, the Torah does not advocate poverty. The Torah wants us to make a living. The Torah wants us to support a family. The Torah wants us to have financial security. Those are good things, but they are good things for a purpose. They are not ends in themselves. In fact, the Rambam even writes, the Rambam, as you know, not in Hilchot Teshuvah, but in Pirkei Avos, the Rambam was a great physician. And the Rambam wrote quite a lot about the importance of protecting your health, preserving your health, diet, exercise, all of these things. The Rambam says a person who does not take care of his health is violating a mitzvah in the Torah, ushmartem es nafshosechem, you shall guard your life. But the Rambam writes, if a person looks at good health as the end-all of their existence, they are just as bad as a person who looks at gluttony as the end-all of their existence. We tend to say, the guy that's a glutton, who just wants to stuff himself, that's a bad guy. But the guy who, jogs 10 miles every day, or runs and watches his health, that's a good guy. The Rambam says, no, you can be addicted to food, or you can be addicted to exercise. There is nothing inherently more virtuous about somebody who is addicted to good health than somebody who's addicted to gluttony. But the thing is, good health is a better end to pursue, or a better means to pursue, because that will enable you to learn more Torah, learn more mitzvos, and live longer. Meaning, even health is not the end-all of things. Health is a means to be able to serve Hashem in our bodies. And that's why it's worthwhile. It is worthwhile. Same thing with financial security. So what happens basically is, as we live our lives in the course of the year, so what happens is the means become the end. Whether it's the financial security, whether it's the health, whether it's the gluttony, it all becomes like the goal of our lives, as opposed to being a means or a stepping stone to a higher goal. And therefore the shofar is to wake us up from the sleepwalking that we go through in life. That's why, indeed, the Rambam doesn't mention it actually, but as you know, obviously, we've been blowing shofar the whole month of Elul after davening. We're not going to do it Sunday. Okay, Erev Rosh Hashanah, you do not blow shofar, because you want to separate between the mandatory shofar blowings of Rosh Hashanah and the minhag shofar blowings. So you have to have a separation. But the makor of blowing shofar during the month of Elul actually is a very old source. It is in the Medrash, Pirkei de Rabbi Eliezer. So it is only a minhag. It is not an absolute halacha, but it's a minhag that is very, very old. A minhag already from the time of Pirkei de Rabbi Eliezer is a late Medrash, but certainly you're talking about the 600s or the 700s and the like. It's a very, very old minhag. And I guess that means, the heavier your sleep, the more times you need the alarm clock to ring. Meaning to say, in the Rambam's time, perhaps they just needed the shofar on Rosh Hashanah. We need the shofar the whole month of Elul. Maybe we need the shofar the whole year, as it were, because of the notion of sleepwalking. So this is an important thing to think about. Sometimes, it's a very funny thing. Sometimes the very thing we don't have time for during the Yom Noraim season is doing Teshuvah, even Yom Kippur, right? We don't have time to do Teshuvah. We're davening all day, right? I mean, how much time do we actually put into? I mean, we say the Al-Chaitz, we say the litanies, we say the listings, but how much time do I spend in looking at my life and what I need to improve and how I need to be better? You know, as strange as it is to say, we actually devote relatively little time to that. And the Shofar, at least during Elul, is supposed to give us that particular recognition. Okay, so I just wanted you to be aware of that famous discussion in the Rambam. But now we jump forward back to Perek Dalet, and I had mentioned that if Perek Gimel is like negative list number 1 of all of the different things that can cause you to lose Olam Haba, Perek Dalet goes off in a different direction and talks about things that are Ma'akevet Teshuvah. Now, first of all, the statement and even the listing of the sins, 24 things hold back the ability to do Teshuvah. Where is that from? Because as you know, every statement in the Rambam is sourced, usually in the Talmud Bavli, but it could be the Talmud Yerushalmi, it could be the Midrashei Halacha, like the Mechilta, but it's sourced. Except where the Rambam occasionally, and not that often, uses the words, Yireh li, it appears to me. And you can actually make a listing that there are fewer than 50 in the whole Mishnah Torah where the Rambam says Yireh li, in which he's saying there is no source, but this is what it appears to, right? So everything in the Rambam is source. Now, where is the source of the 24 things that are Ma'akevet Teshuvah? So this is very unusual. There is no statement to that effect in the Talmud, Bavli or Yerushalmi. It is actually taken from the Rif. The Rif compiled a list from many, many different Gemaras. Like there may be one Gemara here that says, this thing makes Teshuvah hard. And another Gemara says this thing. And it's not brought together as a single list. So the Rif did a very big chiddush here. The Rif was ma'asef, many separate Mamorei Chazal in many, many places. And he compiled a list in Maseches Yuma of 24 things are Ma'akevet Teshuvah. So the Rambam bases Perek Dalet not on a Gemara, Beferish, but based on the Rif, who compiled a listing of Chav Dalet Ma'akevet Teshuvah. But then the Rambam did something very creative on his part. The Rif just listed 24 things. And he didn't explain the significance of the 24 things. And the 24 things, one has nothing to do with the other. So the Rambam was Machadesh that the phrase Ma'akevet Teshuvah has multiple meanings. And different parts of the 24 are Ma'akev in one way, and different parts of the 24 are Ma'akev the other. So let me explain this. This is Mamish, the Rambam's Chiddush. The Rambam says, in Chaf Daled Ma'akevet Teshuvah, there are actually 5 separate categories of what it means Ma'akevet Teshuvah. First of all, what is the word Ma'akevet Teshuvah? So that simply means it makes Teshuvah more difficult. Now, the Rambam himself explains that does not mean Teshuvah is impossible. You can still do Teshuvah. But it means, for reasons that will become clear, Teshuvah becomes more difficult. Because normally, in order to do Teshuvah, even if you want to do Teshuvah, you need a lot of siyata dishmaya. You need a lot of divine assistance. Without divine assistance, you're not going to be able to succeed. So in these Chaf Daled Devarim Ma'akevet Teshuvah, you're not getting all of the divine assistance that you would normally get. But the Rambam says, Chas v'shalom, a person should never think that Teshuvah is impossible. It means he'll have to put more effort, more work, more struggle. Okay, so that's the translation of the term Ma'akevet. Ma'akevet means it holds back Teshuvah. It makes Teshuvah more difficult. But if you keep on persevering, you will achieve a Teshuvah even for these 24 Averos. Okay, now, the 5 categories of the Rambam are the following. He takes the 24 and he says, 4 Averos are Ma'akev Teshuvah because of the magnitude of the sin. So I'm first going to just give you the breakdown, then we'll look at the particular Averos. Meaning, some Averos are so severe that almost as a punishment, God is not going to give you a break in the Siyata D'Shmaya. So 4 out of the 24 is based on the magnitude of the sin. That's category 1 of Ma'akvin. Magnitude, Godel HaChet. Category 2 is sins that simply separate you from the inspiration that would help you do Teshuvah. Right? Now, a person could be, I think I know someone like that, he could be in a middle of a submarine at the bottom of the Atlantic, and there are no Jews for 3,000 miles in any direction, and you can come to Teshuvah. But for most of us, we need what you might call inspirational experiences, whether it be meeting the right rabbis or meeting the right friends, or being at the kaisel, or dancing at a chasana. And if you cut yourself off from inspiration, it'll be harder to do Teshuvah because the things that inspire you are not there. So the second category of Ma'akvin Teshuvah are behaviors that you cut yourself off from inspiration, so you're not going to get the Hisayrus. Meaning not that that's so much of a sin per se, but you simply are not having the Hisayrus that's going to inspire you. Okay, that's the category number 2, and that's going to be 5 of them. So 4 of them are Ma'akvin Teshuvah because of the magnitude of the sin. 5 of them are Ma'akvin Teshuvah because Noyalin Darchei Teshuvah. You're closing off the pathways that would inspire you to Teshuvah. Category 3 are Ma'akvin Teshuvah because they are sins bein Adam lechaveiro, where you cannot identify the victim. Now this is a real big problem, right? Because as you know already, when you commit sins that hurt other people, your Teshuvah requires not only asking God for forgiveness, but asking the people you hurt for forgiveness. But sometimes you're not able to identify your victims. So it's Ma'akev Teshuvah. Teshuvah is going to be hard simply because you're not in a position to be able to make amends. That's going to be 5. Again, I'll give you an illustration of each. Category 4 are 5 Averos, once again, that people don't think are so bad. So once again, if you don't have an awareness that something's bad, you're not going to do Teshuvah. So it's Ma'akvin Teshuvah, not because the Aveira is so bad, but simply because people don't look at it like an Aveira. So then you're in big trouble. If I don't know that something's wrong, I'm not going to do Teshuvah on it. And category 5, which is also 5 Averos, are Averos that are kind of addictive in nature. And therefore it's just hard to pull myself away from them. So basically it's the Rambam divides the 24 sins into 5 groups of 4, 5, 5, 5, 5, right? 5, 5, 5, 5 is 20, and then the first one is 4. And this itself is quite brilliant, because again, if you just looked at the Rif just gives you a list of 24 things that are Ma'akev Teshuvah, and although that itself is a chiddush, because he was ma'asef from many Mamori Chazal, the Rif just gave you a single laundry list, and the Rambam subdivides it into 5 distinct categories. So category 1 is severity of sin. Category 2 is cutting yourself off from inspiration. Category 3 are bein adam lechaveira, where you haven't identified the victim. Category 4 are things that people don't regard as an aveira. And category 5 are what we might call addictive aveiros, that are very difficult to separate. And the Rambam then takes the 24 of the Rif and he assigns the different actions to these categories. So again, I'm not going to go over all 24, but I'll take maybe one or two of each category. So category 1 of the Rambam is the sin is so severe that almost as a punishment, God makes it harder for you to do Teshuvah, although if you persevere, you will still be able to do Teshuvah. So the first one that the Rambam mentions is Machdiyas Harabim, and that is not only do you sin, but you cause other people to sin. You know, I always, I'm reminded, the famous or infamous heretic of the Gemara, who is often called Acher, the other one. We don't even like to mention his name, but he was Elisha ben Avoya. And Elisha ben Avoya was the Rebbe of Rabbi Meir, the Rebbe of the Tana Rabbi Meir. And Rabbi Meir used to continue to learn Torah from Elisha ben Avoya, even after Elisha ben Avoya became a heretic. He seemingly stopped believing, but he still knew all of this Torah. And when people asked Rabbi Meir, why are you learning with Elisha ben Avoya, who's not Bikoris? So Rabbi Meir said, he is like a pomegranate that has edible seeds and an inedible peel. I throw away the peel and I eat the edible seeds. So people often say, they go to college, they go to university, and very often a guy in yeshiva thinks, the easiest courses I can take in university are the Jewish studies courses. That's going to be so easy because, like I remember a course description in Johns Hopkins, was a survey of Jewish religious literature. So first semester, we covered the Bible, the Talmud, and the Medrash. That was the first semester, right? Okay, right. So a yeshiva guy who's actually learned Gemara figures, okay, listen, I can take these courses and it's going to be so easy because it's obviously going to be so superficial that I'll know 10 times more than the professor. Big mistake. Now you might know 10 times more than the professor. That's not necessarily incorrect. But what happens is, if you're talking about a course in which the ideas are going to be apikorsis and kafira and denying that the Torah is from heaven, the Jewish studies courses are the absolutely worst courses you can take. 9 out of 10 times the professor is not at all religious. Even if he's religious, there can still be many problems. So sometimes when the yeshiva guy is warned not to take these courses, his response is, Rabbi Meir learned from Acher, so I'll take the good and throw out the bad. But the short answer is, if you're Rabbi Meir, you can learn from Acher. Right? If you're Rabbi Meir's Madrega, then learn from Acher. If you're not under Rabbi Meir's level, it can be a very dangerous thing. So Machdiyas Harabim is an example of a chait that is so severe that it's very difficult to do Teshuvah. And the Rambam then says, it's lav dafka rabim, many, but even one person. If you led one person astray from a Torah life, that is an Aveira. You can do Teshuvah, but it's very difficult, and the like. Right, so that's just two examples of an Aveira that is so severe that it's difficult, not impossible, but it's difficult to do Teshuvah. Now, category number 2 is not so much severity of Aveira, but you're simply cutting yourself off from inspiration, so therefore it becomes difficult to do Teshuvah. So the Rambam mentions the following. Number 1, Poresh Minat Tzibor, a person who separates himself from the congregation, doesn't want to come to shul, doesn't want to be with other Jews. Right? I separate myself from communities that are doing mitzvos. So even if that's not such a bad aveira in and of itself, but it cuts me off from things that could inspire me. Someone who treats his rabbeim with disrespect. You see the problem? Because if I simply, downgrade my rabbeim or whatever it is, then whatever they want to teach me, I simply don't pay attention to. And I'm cutting myself off from any type of inspiration. You know, the Mesilas Yesharim writes about leitzanus. Leitzanus is like cynical scoffing. You make fun of things. That his lashon is that leitzanus achas, one cynical scoffing remark, doche mea tochachos, can actually destroy 100 messages of musar that would otherwise be taken in. Sometimes you have an experience, sometimes you see it with Derech, you see it in NCSY, where a certain mood is created, maybe even here, a certain mood is created, a very high, elevated mood. It's an elevated mood, a mood of sanctity, a mood of kedusha. But people sometimes get nervous a little bit. It's too intense. So somebody makes a joke. Now, a joke is fine. You know, I'm not against jokes. But the joke destroys the mood, that particular mood. There was a certain mood that was created. The joke kind of brings us back to earth. It's doche the tochecha. That's what the Ramchal is saying. And that could be a very, very dangerous thing. And the Rambam says the averos which kind of denigrate the positive influences that could bring us to Torah are makvinis Teshuvah, simply because I don't have the inspiration that's going to help me. Now, the third category are the averos ben adam lechavero, where you don't know who the victim is. The example, the classic example would be, you stole stuff, right, before you did Teshuvah, you stole stuff and you don't know from whom you stole. You can't make restitution. Now, there's a whole interesting shaila in halacha. Do you have to do Teshuvah for the sins that you did as a katan? Now, clearly, we're not talking about Shabbos or whatever it is. If a person was machal Shabbos below the age of bar mitzvah, whether he's from a frum home or not a frum home, he does not have to do Teshuvah on that. But what about theft? What if, when I was an 11-year-old, I was an active shoplifter? Or, to be more dramatic, I broke into people's houses and took stuff. And there are 11-year-olds who do that. So, do I have to do Teshuvah on what I did as a kid? So, it depends what you mean by Teshuvah. If the stuff I stole is still in my house, right? I stole your laptop when I was 11, but I still have your laptop, then yeah, I got to give it back to you. That's not the question. But the question would be, if I don't have the laptop got thrown out or whatever it is, I spent the money, is there a chiyuv on me to make restitution? So it is a machlokas. Some say it is proper to do so. Others say you're not mechuyev. You did it as a katan. You're not mechuyev to make restitution. Interesting shaila. Do your parents have to make restitution? Usually not. Usually not, because parents are not responsible for what their minor does. Remember, that's why the Mishnah in Baba Kama says, don't mess with a kid. It says encountering a kid can be a lot of trouble, because if you break his arm, you got to pay damages. If he breaks your arm, you can't collect from anybody, right? So stay away from aggressive children, because the encounter will only be to your disadvantage. That's what the Mishnah says in Baba Kama. Okay, but certainly that's only, this machlokas is when you're a katan. When you're a gadol, you vada have to make restitution. But a lot of times, these pickpockets, these robbers, these shoplifters, don't remember what they took and from whom they took. So you do the best you can. The Gemara in Baba Kama says you give the money to tzedakah, or you give the money for public improvements, give it to the city fund for parkland, and that way it's likely the victims will get some benefit from it. But your teshuvah is not complete because you have not made amends to the victim. So that's ma'akvinis teshuvah. It's going to be very hard to do teshuvah when you can't identify the victim. Now, the fourth category are things that people don't, hard to do teshuvah because people don't even look at them as averos. They're not even considered to be averos. Again, I'll just give you an example of them. Subtle averos, but I'll mention two of them that we can be it's very easy to be guilty of, and we don't even think we did anything wrong. One is mischabed b'kolon chavero. That means you get pleasure in someone else being shamed. There actually is a fancy German word for that. It's called Schadenfreude. Now, that means the following. I didn't embarrass you. I said nothing about you at all. I did not do a single thing against you. But somebody else humiliates you. Somebody else embarrasses you. And I'm thinking to myself, I don't even say. I'm glad that guy is getting his just desserts. It's about time somebody told him what type of guy he is. Now, this is called mitzchabed. I get honor or I get pleasure in somebody else's shame. Mitzchabed b'klon chaveira. Now the Rambam says, most people don't even think that's a sin. Yeah, it's a sin to embarrass somebody. Yeah, it's a sin to hurt somebody. I didn't hurt you. And I didn't even say to you afterwards, I'm glad you got your just desserts. Nevertheless, for a person to have joy in the suffering or the downfall of another person is a spiritual avera in Hashem's book, but a person doesn't even think so. They say, a very, very chashuv person in Slobodka, one of the best guys in the yeshiva, came to shul on Shabbos, and out of instinct, call it muscle memory, he took off his jacket and he, raised his sleeve. In other words, like he put on tefillin, and then he said, it's Shabbos. And, some people just smiled at it. It looked a little funny, just a little smile. And the Alter of Slobodka, who noticed everything, there was nothing that ever escaped the Alter of Slobodka's vision, spoke after davening on the tremendous avera of getting pleasure in the embarrassment of another person. He said, this is mischabed b'klon chaveira, and the like. So that's one example of an avera that people don't even think is an avera. And the other example that he gives is choshed b'ksherim. That means I suspect a person of doing something bad that they really didn't do. Meaning I see you going into a McDonald's and I assume in my mind, I don't judge you favorably, I assume in my mind, he's eating treif or whatever it is, as opposed to going to the bathroom. Now, I didn't say anything, but the very idea of choshed b'ksherim is called an avera. And the Rambam says it's very hard to do Teshuvah, not because inherently it's hard to do Teshuvah, but it's hard to do Teshuvah because people don't even look at it like a chet. Yeah.
Would the guy who walked into McDonald's be guilty of lifnei iver?
Well, that's an interesting question. He might be guilty of lifnei iver. On the other hand, I guess the question would be, if the observer was obligated to judge him favorably, then maybe the guy who goes in is not responsible for the person not following what halacha says he was supposed to follow, you see. But I hear there might be a lifnei iver issue there. And the final category are addictive averos that are very hard to separate because you become addicted to them. Let me just take the example that would apply to us. And the Rambam actually gives an example of histaklus be'arayah, shmiras be'einayim. Shmiras einayim, like the notion that the Torah not only prohibits behaviors like hugging, kissing, sexual relationships outside of marriage. But the Torah even prohibits looking with the intent of deriving pleasure. Okay, and I'm not saying you have to cover your head with a blanket like some breastflippers do, but to deliberately be mistakel b'arayos is considered to be usher, and even though people realize that, but that's something that's extremely difficult, and therefore these are kind of what you might call addictive averos that are difficult to be porish. Okay, the point basically is that the Rambam is mechadesh here that the category called ma'akvenes Teshuvah can be for many different reasons, and the different averos fall under different categories. But once again, the Rambam ends with the very reassuring words that ma'akvenes Teshuvah may mean tshuva is difficult, but it is not impossible, and in such a situation you will be able, if you work hard enough, to be zocha to a tshuva shlema. Now the first 4 prakim, which more or less we finished at least in a summary fashion, there are 4 out of 10 prakim. The first 4 prakim are the halachos of tshuva, the halachic aspects of tshuva. The next 6 prakim, which we'll do after Rosh Hashanah B'ezras Hashem, deal with many important philosophical questions, such as free will, Hashem hardening Paro's heart. How do you understand that? What is the nature of Olam Haba, Mashiach, and Techiyas HaMesim as a final reward? So it's a very different type of discussion. It's like 2 different books. Aleph to Dalet are the halachos, and Hey through Yud are dealing with the philosophical issues of Teshuvah. B'ezras Hashem, we'll look at that after Yom Tif. Wish you all a kesiv chesima tova, a shana tova, good ben shur, may be a year of bracha for you individually and for all of Klal Yisrael and the world.
Thank you for listening to this Ohr Somayach production. To find out more and to partner in our mission, please visit ohr.edu.